Good morning, everybody. Or those of you who are here or who have survived so far. My name is Bob Bates. I started writing games in 1986. And since then, I've also been an indie developer, a game designer and programmer, a producer, a publisher, a studio head, an executive at a top 10 multinational publisher. And for the past 6 years, I've had a very happy return to freelance writing, designing, and producing. So for about the last 24 years, I've been trying to make a living from creativity. The title that I'm working on currently is my 40th game. And if you figure that about half of those were studio efforts when I was at Legend, that still leaves about 20 games where I made significant personal contributions to them. Now, the IGDA has done a few surveys of developers in the game industry, and they've discovered that the turnover rate in our business is horrible. Half the people who enter the industry every year, 5 years later, are gone. I've seen this myself, and it causes me to tell students studying game development, and I know there's some here, that contrary to their fears, it's actually pretty easy to get a job in the game industry. The hard part is making a career in it. The corporate cost to the industry of this turnover is huge. We train people only to lose them, and of course the human cost to those people is also huge as they enter a field that they expect to love, only to end up leaving it disillusioned. So I decided to look into the problems that creative people have in our industry, and the result is this talk. Now, by creative people, I mean everyone involved in making a game, from programmers, artists, designers, composers, writers, QA, producers. We all bring creativity and artfulness to what we do. So let's look at the problems. Everyone who wants to lead a creative life quickly runs into all kinds of difficulties no matter what field they're in. Finding meaning in their work, dealing with rejection, surviving identity crises, and sometimes battling depression and addictions. Creatives in an industrial environment, any industrial environment, face additional challenges, reconciling their artistic goals with the financial imperatives of that business, doing repetitive, factory-like assembly line work, and becoming alienated from the product they are making because they only touch a small part of the overall project and thereby lose the connection between the maker and the thing that is made. Creatives in the game industry have even more difficulties, thank you very much, adjusting to the loss of individual vision and service to the collaborative project, dealing with resistance to new ideas that are built into our risk-averse environment, and the long development cycles and canceled projects that limit the number of published titles that any one individual may work on in his or her career. So our identities are tied up in our work, and here we are faced with all these problems. We want to make great games, but we find ourselves working on cookie-cutter projects that might never see the light of day, and even if they do, our contribution to them is so small, it's really hard for you to say, you know what, I made that game. So to help this talk, to get a broader perspective than just my own experience, I interviewed over 60 people in the industry, all the way from workers in the trenches to executives, managers, and also people who have left the industry to find out why. I obviously struck a chord with them because I ended up with hundreds of pages of material to sort through. People poured out their hearts. They bared their souls. I wish I could publish all this stuff. It reminded me again how deep the passion runs in people who make games. I promised them anonymity, but I can tell you that many of the people who I'm going to be quoting, whose words you see up on the screen today, are household names in our industry, many of them actually here in this room. So the talk is divided roughly into 4 parts. Number 1, early in your career, what do you do if you're feeling like a cog in the machine and you have no opportunity to exercise your creativity? Number 2, how to contemplate the risks of making a change. Number 3, later in your career, how do you stay creative and sane? And number 4, what do you do if you find yourself slipping into troubled mental territory? So, being the good critical thinkers we are, the first thing we should do is attack the premise. According to the Department of Labor, people hold an average of about 14 jobs by the time they turn 40. Where previously they predicted that most people will have 3 separate and different careers in their lifetime, they are now predicting that people will have as many as 7 completely different careers. And by that I mean switching from things like being an engineer to a shop owner to being a teacher to having just very, very different careers. Not just jobs, but careers. And they also tell us that almost half of all workers are not happy with their jobs. Several people I talked to pointed out that we've got it better than many creatives in other places. Painters, writers, composers, potters, weavers, they all, or most of them, labor in poverty, insecurity, and often obscurity. Some people said the turnover is healthy. It weeds out those people who shouldn't be in the business in the first place. And of course, it could be that our problems are the downside of the phrase, do what you love and the money will follow. We are doing what we love, but we're finding out that what we love is turning into work. And then finally, there's the theory that being unhappy is part of what makes people creative in the first place. In other words, we're just a bunch of crybabies. Nevertheless, our problems are real. Some of us do feel like cogs in the machine. Some of us are wondering whether we should make a move or stay where we are. We wonder how we can survive in an industry that treats us so horribly. And these are the things that we grumble about over coffee. These are the problems that the folks in the room next door are ranting about, which is a video that I hope to see, because that's always a lot of fun. But although ranting is fun, it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So, why might you feel like a cog in the machine? Some people said that they believe people feel that way because of a misalignment of perceptions of people coming into the industry. Of course, playing a game is a lot different than making a game. But the reality is that this is where most people start. Most of the people who you think of as leaders in our industry started off as a cog. And not only that, but it turns out that everyone is a cog. No one gets to make the game that they themselves want. Not everyone can be the vision holder. But if that's how you have to start out, if you're going to start out by being a cog, how do you make the best of it? Be the cog. So, and while you're a cog, put in your 10,000 hours. Malcolm Gladwell and many others have written that it takes 10,000 hours of work to become an expert in any creative endeavor. From the Beatles to Bobby Fischer, no one ever made it big without putting in those 10,000 hours. Others pointed out that you actually have a huge advantage. Although you're a cog, you're on the inside. You're in the best possible position to move forward. You're surrounded by experts, people who really know what they're doing, people you can learn from. You've got world-class tools at your disposal, often concept art for the game or whatever. You can use all this to practice and get better. And you can also use this time to not only just work on the game that you're working on, but to find out if that's the kind of game that you want to keep making. There are many kinds of games to make, and this is an opportunity for you to figure out what you like. So, there are all kinds of music, and orchestral music is one of them. The typical violin section in a symphony orchestra has about 30 to 35 players, and each of them is playing the absolute best that they know how. Being a cog in that musical machine is vital to the creation of that grand style of music. And if you're happy in that role and find that you like making that kind of grand music and your company values that, then that's not a bad thing. But if you find that your company doesn't value you in that role, that they think that cogs are interchangeable and that you're just a piece of the machine, then perhaps you might switch to a company that does appreciate you. And if you find that you're frustrated, on the other hand, with that role, then perhaps you should find a different kind of music that you might want to play, perhaps with a smaller ensemble where you can play a larger role. These opportunities exist in our industry again now. They haven't for a long time, but there are many chances to move from a large company to a smaller one. And then there's my vacuum theory. In every game company, there are jobs that aren't getting done. And so usually what you'll find out is of all the things that are getting done, they'll find something right over here that isn't happening. And if that's something that you're interested in and you volunteer to do it, you'll find that you start to do it and you ended up sort of getting sucked up into the management of the company. And you find that that's a way out of cogland, is by doing something that needs to be done. When you become a valuable member of the team doing something like that, you end up moving up. And so lots and lots of people start in the industry, any place, and then find out where they want to be, find out the thing that you want to do, start to do that thing, and you'll find that if you're good at it, people will let you do more of it. If you are a solution to a manager's problem, they will like you. But sometimes you just have to work for the money, or for the experience, or just for the opportunity to work on the next project that's coming along. But my best advice is to find something to be excited about on that project. You need to find something to love, or you're not going to do a good job. And on top of that, you're going to be miserable. Okay, so you've been a cog long enough, and you're ready to make a change, and you're nervous about making a move. Should you move to another company? Should you move up the ladder to a lead position in your own company? Should you go independent or freelance? There's a risk. We'll talk about all of these risks. There's a risk of changing companies because companies and projects come and go. Any move you make is inherently risky. We all know people who have been laid off, or their studio's been closed, or their project has been canceled. It really is impossible to know in advance how stable and sound a company is before you might go there. But it's worse than that, because to stay where you are may be riskier than moving on. And this is an important point, and it's reverberated not just in our industry, but throughout a lot of different industries. Each of us, is now an entrepreneur. And your business is you. The corporate safety net is long gone, so it's up to each of us to find our next job, to manage our own career progression, to figure out where that next promotion is going to come from, and to recognize that every option we have, whether staying still or moving, entails risk. No one that I talked to had any idea how to eliminate this risk. The best we can do is try to manage it intelligently. So then there's the risk of moving up to a lead or a manager position. People ask, won't I miss the hands-on creativity that I get to exercise now? You know, there's a real joy to be found in hands-on work. You don't hear people talk about it much, but it really is creativity in its most raw form. The ability to get an idea and to bring it into existence. That's really thrilling. And it's really powerful. And again, I don't hear people talk about this much, but there's a real sense of power. When you have a good set of tools and the skill to use them, it's enormously addicting. Whether they're art tools or a programming language or music and composition tools or a level editor or whatever, when you're skilled and you have a vision, you have power. You can sit down and you can make something. A sculptor can chisel the marble the way that he wants. A potter can model the clay. A painter can wield his brush. And we can do this, and we can do the same. Is that something that you want to give up? Maybe. Another way of thinking about this is how directly we get to touch the audience. At a hands-on level, we use the tools that directly touch the audience. We're writing the words that they hear. We are painting the textures that they will see. We're building the levels that they walk through. At a lead or director level, you are directing the teams that use those tools instead of using them yourself. Are you happier having that direct effect on the audience in a single dimension, or might it be more satisfying to you to have a broader influence on more areas of the game? Another thing to consider here, completable tasks. I love driving long distances. I like getting in the car and going from here to there. It's a simple task. It's something that I can do. There's nothing else that I should be doing while I'm doing that. It's not like, when you're driving, you shouldn't be texting, you shouldn't be doing all sorts of other things. You are doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And having a skill and performing a task is kind of like that. You're being asked to do something. You can do it well. You can finish it. You can be praised for it. And you can move on to the next task. When you move up into management, that world goes away. When you're a manager, there are always a million things that you should be working on, none of which you feel like you're doing as well as you should be doing, and most of which you'll probably get yelled at for doing at all. So when you're a manager, there's always something else that you should be doing. But as a manager, you have the opportunity for a different kind of joy. There's a happiness that comes from helping others. Nicole Lazzaro would call it nachez. It's the pride of accomplishment, the accomplishments of those whom you have helped, or perhaps the pride in the accomplishments of the organizations that you have built. For some of the people I interviewed, that pride was stronger than any of the achievements that they had accomplished as hands-on game makers. One designer said that his pride in his team was almost parental. Another thing that people worry about is, will they still get to be creative? As a project lead, you get to tap into the creativity of others to fulfill visions that you could never fulfill on your own. If I did the art for my games, everything would be stick figures. I can say that I want, the ground to shake when the monster walks across the field, but it takes a modeler and an animator and a sound effects guy and a particles programmer to make the audience feel when that giant foot smashes into the ground and the rocks fly up all around. That's something that I can't do by myself, and there's a creativity and a joy in that particular kind of collaboration, and it is a separate kind of creativity. It's like when someone, a musician, puts down his instrument to become a conductor. He doesn't get to play anymore, but he gets to influence the entire ensemble. He gets to direct the emotional experience that the audience will have, which is pretty powerful stuff. Some people found it useful to distinguish between artistic creativity and problem-solving creativity. Artistic creativity might be inhibited in our industrial environment, but that very same environment offers plenty of opportunities for problem-solving creativity in a managerial role. Many of the people talked about the creative challenges that come from working within constraints, and that their creative urges were more than satisfied by solving these problems. Many found it actually more rewarding than the hands-on work that they had done earlier in their careers. Some people have the ambition to impact the industry, to make a change, to move our art form forward, and they noted that it's difficult to do that from a position in the trenches. To make an impact on our industry, you may have to do it from a leadership or a managerial role. And then there's the vision thing. Quite a few people talked about getting into management in order to protect their creative vision. But most leads quickly come to the conclusion that vision isn't something that you create. It is a synthesized product that you contribute to. So, will you get to be creative? Clearly the answer is yes. But it's a different kind of creativity with different kinds of rewards. So next we have the risk of failure in moving up to a lead or manager position. A lot of people said that the thing that they worried about most in advance before accepting a promotion was whether or not they'd actually be able to do the job. For most of them, it didn't turn out to be a problem at all. And for those who didn't come through it okay, for those for whom it was a problem, they found that it wasn't too hard to revert to a former position. But a lot of people pointed out the need for training. Many of them were surprised at the number of things that they had to learn when they started managing people and how little support their companies gave to train them. And then there are people who are worried about whether they'd be able to let go, whether they'd be able to let other people do the kinds of work that they once did themselves. You need to accept and understand that other people will do things differently. And at first you might think that they're doing it wrong, but when you take a step back, you'll find that it's often just different, and in fact, often better. And of course, also when you're in a lead position or director position, if you find that somebody is not doing the job the way that you believe it needs to be done, you have the option of hiring somebody else who can. So then there's the risk of going freelance. Should I shuck all this aside and go out on my own? The advantages and disadvantages of doing this are really a whole separate talk. So I'm just going to hit the points that relate to creativity here. If your reason for going freelance is so that you can exert more creative control, forget it. I've been doing freelance work for 6 years. I really like it. But I can tell you that my job is always to understand what somebody else's vision is, what their goals are, help them to clarify those goals, and then help the team realize their vision. And that's their vision. It's not my vision. Maybe I can contribute to it along the way, but this job is much more collaborative, not less collaborative. You have to have a range of skills, not just one skill, in order to do this work. I don't believe that I could make a living just as a freelance writer, which is why my card says designer and producer on it as well. And in addition to whatever skills that you do have, whatever constellation or cluster of skills you have, you also have to add business savvy on top of that, because once again, you are managing yourself as a business. One advantage of creativity as freelancing with regard to creativity is that if you're lucky, you'll get to pick and choose the projects that you work on, whereas often you don't have the luxury of doing that if you're working within a given company. When somebody calls me up for a project that I'm clearly not suited for, I tell them so, and I redirect them to somebody who can. And that makes 3 people happy. That makes them happy because they've got somebody who can do the job. It makes the person that I referred them to happy because they've got work to do. And it makes me happy because I'm not doing work that I can't do. But, of course, that's not an unlimited freedom because turning down work means you don't get paid. But oddly, one of the biggest advantages of freelancing is the exact opposite of what you might expect, which is security. When you work for a company, one phone call from headquarters can kill you. One phone call can shut down your project, can call for layoffs, can kill your studio. As a freelancer, you do not live in fear of that one phone call. And that's a great thing. To me personally, that's one of the biggest reasons why I resist going back into the corporate world, because when bad things happen, and bad things happen a lot to us, right now I always have options. But of course that is balanced by the fear as a freelancer that no one will call. So that's a different fear. So if you're considering going freelance, here's some questions to ask yourself. Do you have a sufficient network of contacts in the industry? Do you have the discipline to work on your own? Are you comfortable with the insecurity of not knowing what you're going to be working on 6 months from now? And will you be happy collaborating with other people to make their visions come to life? And then there's a slightly different flavor of being independent, and that's being the lone wolf, the person who is going to make their own project come hell or high water. Like the freelancer or the lone wolf, has got to have a wide range of skills, a great deal of business savvy. And the thing that seems to attract lone wolves more than anything else is the total control that they can exercise over a project. They want to succeed or fail on their own. End of sentence. So those are the risks you face when you're thinking about making a change. And the question remains, should you do it? Will you be happier if you do or if you don't? And how can you make that decision? That's a really hard decision to make. In his book, Stumbling on Happiness, Daniel Gilbert says that the single best way to predict whether you'll be happy making a career change is not to look within yourself, but to consult with other people with similar backgrounds who have made a change like that and ask them about it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do with this talk, to give you the benefit of having talked with dozens and dozens of industry people. So if you're thinking about making a change, go out and talk to folks who have done it before you, who have blazed that path. But that having been said, it's really important to understand yourself, because you are really not exactly like anyone else. But you have an incredible number of resources, more than ever before, to draw on to understand the landscape. You can figure out now what kind of work that you like. Do you want to work on a big team or a small team? Big company versus a small indie. AAA titles versus casual. Violent games versus non-violent games. RPG, shooter, sports games, puzzle games, etc., etc., etc. You have to know what you like in order to make good decisions. And going to a smaller team may give you the opportunity to wear more hats. Does that sound appealing to you or not? You might love something but not be the best at it. Most people want to be exceptional. What would make you exceptional? If you have a single skill, maybe you should stay focused on those large projects. Resist promotion, stay within a company, and do that thing that you love to do more than anything else. But if you have many skills, maybe you should consider smaller projects or trying to move up to a lead position within a company so that your influence can go across those many skills that you do have. But also remember that when you're trying to make these choices, remember that you will experience personal growth over time. The things that you are willing to do and want to do when you're 23 years old may be very different than what you are willing to do or want to do when you are 35. But most of all, when you're considering a change, look at the people more than the job. Almost every single person I talked to brought up on their own how fulfilling it is to work with talented people, and when the people aren't right, how much that sucks. And I could have filled 20 screens with quotes from people in the business about this. Independent research shows that the biggest factor in job satisfaction is not the job itself or the salary that goes with it, but whether or not you like and respect the people that you work with. So, if you're looking to make a change, try to meet as many people in this new company and new position as you can. That meat grinder interview that we all go through when you show up on that day and you talk to 12 people and you're drinking through that particular fire hose, that meat grinder interview works both ways, because you should be interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you, so you don't end up working with those folks. You can also get a pretty good idea of a company or a studio culture simply by asking the people there what life is like. And in particular, consider that some companies, some places, are actually extremely focused on matching people's goals with the company needs. And those are really good places to work, because if those things don't align and everybody recognizes it, then usually you'll find out that they say, you know what, this isn't a fit, but maybe that would be a fit over there. Or maybe this isn't the right place for you and you should think about going over there. But the consensus opinion on all this, should I take the risk? Should I take the risk? What should I do? And I don't want you to come up to me 2 years from now and punch me in the nose because I gave you this advice. But almost every person that I talked to said the same thing. Embrace the risk. It's better to move on than to stay where you are and be unhappy. Worries tend to be misplaced. Many people said that they worried about the wrong things entirely, and any problems that they did end up having tended to be unforeseeable. So the time they spent worrying was wasted. Only a few people actually regretted their moves, and even those people said that even though that particular move didn't work out, it was still the best thing for them to do in the long term. As you change jobs, the knowledge that you learn in each one helps you with the next. They make you more valuable as time goes on, and the more valuable you become, the easier it is to build a long-lasting career. In my own case, every time that a company has crumbled underneath me, 6 months later, I was absolutely happier in my new job than I was in my old one. And it turns out that there are good, strong psychological reasons for this. So I will pause and drink, as my notes say, while you can read this slide. So in the next part of this talk, let's move on to the issues of creativity itself. How do you stay creative and how do you stay sane in the face of all the turmoil and risk that surrounds us? Well, first and foremost, and this is, again, constant from everybody I talk to, you have to adapt and you need to keep learning. From a career point of view, to stand still is to be run over. You have to keep updating your skill set. From a creativity point of view, the more you know, the more creative you can be. Because creativity is about making new associations. The more you know about the more fields, the more associations you can make, and the more creative you can be. The book The Medici Effect claims that creativity and innovation lies at the cross-section of disciplines. Again, everything you learn is the foundation for what comes next, and the more skills you have, the more opportunities you will have to demonstrate your talent and to apply your creativity. Most of the people that I talk to have their own projects on the side. The ones who don't generally say it's because their work keeps them very busy or creatively fulfilled. But most of the people did have personal projects. Many of them said, I can't help it. I just have to do it. A lot of them said that the freedom from commercial restraints gave them absolute control. In other words, they embraced and they loved the collaborative nature of their work, but they still enjoyed having areas of their life where they didn't have to answer to anybody else. Some creators are explorers, and the areas that they want to look into are either not possible in our industry or not relevant to our business. And others in that same vein said that side projects gave them freedom to explore technical areas without risking their company's money. People with side projects learn things in other efforts that they can bring back to their commercial work. Insights come from the oddest of hobbies and activities. And if you ever listen to a Will Wright talk, then you'll get that in spades. And then if you try to bring a side project to market on your own, if you have a book that you're trying to write and publish or paintings that you try to sell, you suddenly get an appreciation for all of the business functions that surround us in our business. Things like contract negotiation, doing your own PR and marketing, managing production. This makes you more appreciative of the experts that you work with in your business, and people said that it made them more desirous of being expert in their own area so that they could be of value to those folks. And now, without going too deeply into the psychology of creativity, there are a few useful things to point out about creative personalities and the things that motivate creative people to do good work. This material is useful for creative people to know because if you don't know what you need, how will you know what to ask your managers for? And of course, if you are a manager managing creative people, this information is pretty useful to you as well. So the reason I haven't attended a whole lot of sessions this week is that I've been trying to figure out how to pronounce this guy's name. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi is his name, and he's known to most developers for his work on the experience of flow. But he's also spent 30 years studying how creative people live and work, and he says that creative people alternate between extended periods of great exertion and periods of quiet and reflection. They combine playfulness and discipline. They tend to be both extroverted and introverted, which is quite unusual because most people are one or the other. And because there's no objective way to judge a person's creative work, they're often exposed to suffering and pain. In work that most of you are probably familiar with, Roger von Eck believes that each creative person houses within him 4 separate personalities. The explorer, who goes off in search of new ideas. The artist, who creates something out of those ideas. The judge, who sits back and decides whether that work is good enough for other folks to see. And then the warrior, who goes out and fights for those ideas once he believes in them. Malcolm Gladwell says there are 3 things that motivate creative people. Autonomy, a sense that we have the authority to approach a problem in our own way. And that's a big deal. Back to the whole cog business, when people don't feel they have that authority, that's a big problem. Complexity or mastery, a sense that the problems are not simple ones, that they require some skill to master. And purpose, a connection between the effort and a reward that we value, whatever that reward may be. You know, I went to Chris Hecker's talk on Thursday, and of course, if I could speak as fast as he, I could give you his entire talk in right now. But one of the things he did is he laid out extensive research that shows that giving extrinsic rewards for complex tasks is actually counterproductive. And creativity is one of those complex tasks. And many of those studies have been aimed at examining both innovation and creativity. So, for example, Teresa Amabile is a professor at the Harvard Business School who studies creativity in industrial environments. And according to her studies and experiments, extrinsic rewards actually inhibit creativity. When people feel like they're being rewarded for an activity, that feeling of external control is enough in and of itself to reduce their creativity. It's counterproductive. But if their intrinsic motivation is high, if we're passionate about what we're doing, then creativity will flow. So, what does that mean for all of us? Well, here are the kinds of intrinsic rewards that people said were particularly effective for them. And the reason I include this stuff, again, if you are a creative person and you're trying to figure out what to ask for or what would make you happy, it's hard to understand that sometimes just being on our own. So this research is useful. And again, if you're managing creative people, this is very useful. You should try and work in an atmosphere or develop an atmosphere where we feel we are appreciated. For many people, it came down to being shown that they are respected for their contribution, whatever form that respect may take. It might be monetary or the granting of increased scope on the next project or even just a special ceremony. But management showing trust in an individual is also a huge motivator. Team outings and activities that were fun and helped people get to know each other. Positive feedback, both from management and team members, that convey the sense that an individual is both respected and valued. Paying for an individual to attend an industry conference. It shows that the company respects that person and is willing to invest in his or her personal growth and their professional growth. And it also shows trust in their own company, which is nice to see, and that they're not afraid for people to come and see what life is like in other companies. People appreciate being allowed to experiment in areas of personal interest. And overall, the feeling that one is on a great team where everyone is working hard to create a great product. So we've seen that extrinsic rewards in general are not effective motivators of creativity. And in particular, and quite surprisingly, almost everyone I talked to said that money was not a motivating factor for them. And in fact, there's a ton of research that shows that once a person's basic life needs are met, the amount of money they make is irrelevant to their happiness. So here are some of the extrinsic rewards that don't work, like delayed rewards. Our projects are long and difficult. Delaying the reward for that work until the end of the project is ineffective. There's the wrong kind of money, like bonus plans that are not delivered or where the rules change. But sometimes people felt taking away a promised perk was worse than never getting a perk at all. The bonus plan that pits employees against each other are demotivating, especially plans that identify elites among the teams. Plans that are based on metrics that the employee feels he has no chance of influencing. And people were especially leery of bonus plans that feel fake and artificial, pie-in-the-sky promises that seem geared simply to get everyone to do maximum crunch. And then bonus plans that cause people to take actions that discourage best practices or are not in the best interests of the game. But before I create the impression that creative people aren't interested in money at all, here are some extrinsic rewards that do seem to work. So there's the right kind of money, like a salary that shows that the company respects you and the contribution that you're making. Profit sharing or option plans that were regarded as quantifiable and real. Some kind of compensation for short, limited crunches, not death marches, but crunches that have specific goals and short durations, followed by an immediate reward for that particular effort. Something like time off after a crunch to get an E3 demo ready, something like that. And then there are different rewards for different disciplines. Maybe for artists, it's organizing life studies classes. And these rewards fall into the category that Chris was talking about that are endogenous rewards. Rewards that when you like doing something and you get a reward that helps you do that thing better, that's a good kind of a reward. It's an endogenous reward. For game designers, maybe it's board game night or taking everybody out to the movies. For programmers and sound guys, high-end software, high-end PCs. And for everyone, it's creating structures that ensure keeping everyone informed and in the loop. Moving from what motivates creative people, let's look at the kinds of environments that it's best for them to work in. Going back to different phases of creativity, it's not too hard to see that some kinds of creativity need time and solitude. Time for reflection. Time for the pieces to reassemble themselves. Time for the big picture to emerge in your head. At times like that, you might need to be alone. You might need a place where the noise can drop away so you can hear the voice in your head talking to you again. And for times like that, you probably want an office with a door that you can close. Good noise-canceling headphones are a big deal. I often just go for a walk. Just get out of the office and walk around. But there's the other kind of creativity. That's the idea-popping, lightning exchange of lively minds at work, people bouncing ideas off each other, building on what each other has to contribute until the result is much cooler than what one person would have dreamed up on their own. Bullpens and open office plans often provide this kind of creative atmosphere. And open office plans also got points for improving a sense of teamwork and accountability. But the best kinds of offices, I think, are the ones that offer both kinds of spaces. Spaces to be alone and places to mingle. I remember with great fondness the Infocom offices in Cambridge, where each of the designers had his own office around a central pod or a lobby that they called the Imps Lounge. And so each had his place where he could retreat to do solitary work, but when they wanted to talk or had a problem or wanted to bounce ideas off people, they could come out into this common area. And that was a very nice place. But there are physical environments that discourage creativity. And the one that came under the most attack was cubicles. People hate cubicles. They're not private enough to give you solitude, and they're not open enough to encourage the free flow of ideas. And the other thing to mention here, again, is equipment. People need good tools to do good work, A lot of people don't care if their office is too luxurious or whatever, great Persian carpets on the floor, or wonderful view of the city or whatever. They just want good tools to do good work. Some corporate environments or company cultures are seen as encouraging creativity. And it's important to understand that studio cultures are not fixed. They are defined by the people who work there, like you. So you can influence your company culture, your studio culture. And here are some of the things to shoot for. For all the talk that we hear about flat teams and group decision making, most of the people that I talk to didn't want companies to be too democratic. People want to have a say. They want to be heard. They want their contributions to be considered. But they also want the sense that there's a decision maker, that there's somebody who is in charge. Not surprisingly, people like to work where the management treats people as they themselves would like to be treated. Where the game is the thing, where making a great game is what matters, where it's recognized that people are striving for the common good rather than to further some bizarre personal agenda. Where managers give credit where credit is due, and environments that encourage playfulness, even though making games is serious business. And then the environments and cultures that discourage creativity, not surprisingly, where there are dual standards for managers, and they're set aside as some sort of elite. Where bad communication runs up and down within a company from the top to the bottom or side to side between departments, or bad communication within sub-teams on a project. Company instability, where there are frequent changes in strategic direction, or knowing that the team will be laid off when the project is completed. It's hard to pursue lofty goals when you and everyone around you is concerned or worried about paying the rent. And matrix management also took quite a few hits. People like to work in teams and be responsible to those teams. They don't want their annual review to be done by some department head who has no real knowledge of their performance. And then there's just bad management in general. Managers who play favorites and establish cliques of people to listen to. People who aren't appreciative of effort, especially at crunch when they take it for granted. Managers who don't keep promises, or who don't keep their employees informed, or worse, who give their employees a sense that they're being lied to. In this last part of the talk, I hope that I'm addressing only a few of you, and I should express that I am speaking completely off my own bat rather than folks that I interviewed. But what do you do when you are in trouble, when you are in despair, when the idea of getting out of bed and facing the world that day is more than you can imagine? As I said at the beginning, creative people in general are unusually subject to dark moods and depression. Our identity is wrapped up in our work. And in our business, that's a pretty dangerous basket to be putting all of your eggs in. We have chosen an unconventional path. We take risks that our society and even our peers think are foolish. We work without a net. Our artistic goals and products are subject to attack both from our own critical inner voices and also from the harsh environment that we work in. So here are some words that I hope will help you along if you are in this situation. Take care of the physical plant. Keep yourself healthy. Alcohol is not your friend. And I'm not even sure that caffeine is either. But you do need a friend. Find someone you know who you can talk to, because you're not alone. A lot of us feel this way. When you're feeling overwhelmed, tackle large problems one small piece at a time. Sometimes it's important to allow yourself to be less than perfect, because there are some tasks where good enough is good enough. If you're a procrastinator, like me, see if there's some things that you can handle right away. Sometimes the underbrush piles up so high that it's impossible to see the trees, much less the forest. Also see if there are some things that you might just be able to cross off your list so that you can stop worrying about them. Especially things that you feel like you ought to do, but that you don't have to do. There are lots of things that I'd like to do in my life, and I have them on my to-do list, and my to-do list gets overwhelming, and sometimes I just have to say, you know what? That's not going to happen, and I'm not going to worry about it. The fear that you will never be that good again is unfounded. I think we've all looked back at work that we've done a year ago, 5 years ago, and you look at that and you say, man, that was pretty good. Am I that guy who did that? I'll never be that good again. You will be that good again. You know more now than you did then, and there's good work and pleasant surprises still ahead of you. It might help to get medical help. Seeing a doctor is not a sign of weakness. It is often a sign of courage. And although they're great advisors, remember that you have to stay your own main advocate. Find something that's fun. And that's kind of hard to do. I think I live a pretty integrated life where a lot of what I do feeds into the other things that I do. But the downside of that is sometimes it's hard to know when you're having fun. If I'm reading a book, am I reading it because I want to read that book or because it's going to be useful to me? If I'm watching a movie, am I having fun or am I kind of looking at the plot structure and trying to figure out if that's applicable to something that I might use one day? So see if there's something that's just fun, something that you don't have to worry about whether it connects back to the rest of your life, even though one day that might happen. Even on your bad days, try to keep pushing things forward. If you're feeling overwhelmed by responsibility to a project or to an organization, remember that no project ever failed because just one person left it. And if you're really down, remember that depression runs in cycles. Although it may be hard to imagine today, the day will come once again when you can laugh and have fun. And I believe that most of these problems are actually crises of meaning. We need to believe that we matter and that our work is important. And because our products are entertainment, sometimes that's a little bit difficult. But I think that in order for us to be happy, our work must be meaningful to us because we are, after all, artists. So see if you can find some way to inject meaning and purpose into your life. And if you can, I think you'll find that both your games and you will be better for it. But let's see if we can wrap up on a slightly brighter note. I called this talk The Belly of the Whale because that's the part of the hero's journey where he appears overwhelmed by the evil forces of the world. When you're in the belly of the whale, it almost seems like you're being swallowed up by something larger than you, something huge and unyielding, something too big to fight. Something like the game industry. When you're in the belly of the whale, you are lost, uncertain, confused about what to do and which way to go. But realizing you are in the belly of the whale is the final step before metamorphosis. It's the last step the hero undergoes before he undergoes transformation and finally makes the change that allows him to triumph. So, if you're feeling like a cog, be patient. Learn your craft. If you're feeling trapped, there are ways out, good ways out. There are many opportunities and choices. If you're feeling isolated, remember you are not alone. There are many people in this industry who want to see you succeed. We're all in this together. If you're worried about money, just make sure you cover the basics. And beyond that, if you're trying to make a choice, go for job satisfaction rather than a fatter paycheck. If you're afraid of the risk, talk to the people who have been there and embrace change as part of your life's journey. And if you're troubled, try to bring meaningful work into your life. Work that gives you autonomy, complexity, and purpose. And to live a creative life, wherever you are in your career, keep learning, play nice, and work hard. Thank you. We have time for some questions. There's a microphone over here. And in the meantime, speaking of making things better, please fill out your evaluation forms. The GDC uses these to determine who to allow back as speakers for the future. So if you want the conference to get better, they read all of those comments, good and bad. So fill out those comments, send them back. And questions? Yes, sir.
Hi. Sorry, it's not a question. I just wanted to say that I highly enjoyed your rant, and I think it's of interest to all developers, including jobless ones.
I really can't understand what you're saying.
So
I'm
that
sorry.
seems to be me and microphones.
It's the sound.
Can you hear me like this when I speak like this? No?
Tell you what.
Yeah. I'll tell you later. It's okay.
No, just speak in the mic. I'll just be able to hear you. Yeah, the sound is not good up there.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed the rant.
Ah.
I think it's applicable to all developers, including jobless ones. It's a subtle thing, guys, next time.
Okay.
But it was really good.
Thank you. Other questions? Yeah, I need a hug.
So you mentioned that you gathered mountains of data, more than you could fit into the presentation and so on, even if anonymously. Is it at bobbates.com? Is there someplace we can find the mountains of quotes and things? Or
So far, not yet. Okay. I've spent a couple months actually just kind of getting all this done. And now that I have it, I don't know quite what to do with it. I think probably the best thing to do is to write back to the folks and see who is willing to be attributed, because some of these comments came from very, very interesting people, and many of them have said, sure, go ahead, use my name, but I promised anonymity. So I do anticipate a little bit of follow-on with this to try and see if I can make this material available, because it's really inspiring.
Since you've got a writing background, have you considered a book?
I haven't added up the hours yet, but I think I spent almost as much time on this talk as I did writing my game design book. Almost as much. It was very difficult. Yes.
Hey, I'm Nathan Pierce from Sony Online Entertainment. It's a brilliant talk. It's my favorite of the show. I put that on my sheet.
Oh, thank you.
Really, really appreciate it. I wanted to hear what you had to say about procrastination and the tendency of our type of people to get excited about an idea to maybe the 75% mark and then not, dot the I's and cross the T's, and then it kind of languishes. I find in my own work sometimes I have a plethora of three-quarter finished projects.
Uh-huh.
And how do you get over that hump?
Well, so Hemingway said the only thing to do with a novel is to finish it, right? And so the biggest thing about procrastination, I think, first is if you can get something done right when it hits your desk, do it. If it's a small task, just get it out. If it's an email, something that you can pop out, just get it done, unless you're in the middle of some big, deep thing. If you're in a position where you have a project that's like three-quarters done, and the important thing there is to identify the one small next step, the smallest thing you can think of that would be the next step to take. Because for me personally, I think, oh my God, I've got all the rest of this stuff to do, but you know what? The next thing I need to do is name this file. And it's like, all right, I'm going to open this file, I'm going to name it. And personally, I find once you take one tiny, small step, that gets the ball rolling, and it becomes much easier to then keep going.
That's a great answer. There's a work philosophy around that called getting things done.
Yes.
Have you heard of that?
Yes.
Get the smallest things off your desk and out of your mind as fast as you
can. Yeah, I think the guy's name is somebody Allen. Yeah. So, yeah.
Hey, Bob. Great talk. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get everything written down during the talk. Are these slides going to be available anywhere?
So GDC, I think, generally, they filmed the presentation. I believe that it will be available on GDC Vault. And they give us permission to repurpose this material. So I don't know what I'll do, but I'll try and do something. I have the worst website in the world. If any of you have seen it, it's like just words. So I would love to put this on the website if I could ever figure out how to do that, but I don't have that skill set. So.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
This was a follow-up to the question, not the last one, but the one before. What do you do if you have sort of an ADD mentality, or if it's very easy to get derailed from the work you've been working on for a few hours? Let's say you get up to go to the bathroom, or you go to check your email, and then just all that momentum you've built up on the work is suddenly gone. How do you maintain that or re-energize it? Is it just the same methods as the other stuff, or? Okay, so I don't have that personality, so it's kind of hard for me to address that from a personal point of view. The thing that I find useful when leaving something off is to leave myself a reminder of the next thing that I should do on it. So if it's like I'm working on something and it's time to go to dinner or something like that, I'll say, when you come back, do this. And so that's a more structured kind of thing. If it's something where you're actually just distracted away, I suspect that there are ways to make that work for you, because I think that folks who can do that, they switch from thing to thing to thing to thing, and then they come back and then they add and then they add and add and add. The one thing I would discourage people strongly from is multitasking, if you can avoid it. Are you giving me the signal that time is up? Oh, sorry. So this will be the last question. There's a lot of work on, or some work on multitasking as it relates to complex tasks versus routine tasks. You'll find a lot of people, and I've had huge arguments with folks about this, programmers who think that they work better with music playing, or people who are doing their homework and they think it's better to have lots of things going on while that's happening. It turns out that for some sets of tasks, it is true that is not a problem. And those are routine, repetitive tasks. For tasks that require deep creative thought and innovative solutions, multitasking is a bad idea. Because what's happening, if you're listening to music, for example, that part of your brain is getting used up by the music that's coming in, and so you don't have it available to you, along with all the other parts of your brain, to come to better solutions than you would otherwise. So what you find is that somebody gets to an answer, and then they get to a local maximum, but they never realize that if they go back down from there, they can actually find another place where there's a better answer. So I don't know how much that addresses what you're talking about, but I would say try not to multitask if you can avoid it. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.